Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the OU and Parks Trust podcast. I'm Ellie Broad from the Parks Trust, and with me today are Dr. Jitka Sachechkova, who is a senior lecturer in health and social care at the Open University. And we've also got Dr. Abigail Methley, who is a senior clinical psychologist from North Staffordshire Combined Healthcare NHS Trust. Today we'll be talking a little bit about what happens to our brains as we age, and how walking outdoors can be a great way to keep our brains healthy into older age. So Dr. Jitka has been researching what happens to our brains as we get older. So Jitka, tell me, what does happen?
The age-associated decline is both physical and cognitive. In other words, it affects our muscles, bones, our joints, our brain, as well as all other organs. So our brain, in a sense, being a central computer where everything that's happening in our bodies gets processed. It is worth noting that our brain consumes about 20% of all glucose and 20% of all oxygen consumed by the whole body. So it takes an awful lot to work optimally. And as we grow older, but also throughout the lifespan, we need to make sure that we are making sure we're responsible to get all this provision, the oxygen and glucose and all the other nutrients to our brain, because it is extremely sensitive to the lack of those. And if we want it to perform optimally, aging or not, we need to make sure we have enough oxygen and glucose for the brain to run. Often we're troubled by questions as we grow older, such as whether it's normal to forgetting names or faces of people, or what people do, or whether we did switch the oven before we left home. Usually the answer is yes. All this is an expected part of the decline brought about by age-related changes. It is the natural wear and tear of our brain. And when we're younger, this happens as well. There is also tiredness, but it's much easier to sleep it off. The older we become, the more worn out our bodies and brains get, and the sleep does not really get better and easier as we grow older. So this is what makes it harder. Changes accumulate, or age-related changes accumulate, pile up, and it just continues and contributes to the overall wear and tear. Other factors in the play are also other organs and systems. So for example, systems that make sure that the blood containing the oxygen and nutrients so needed by the brain actually reaches the brain, and reaches the brain in regular intervals, because it's not only getting the oxygen in once or twice a day, it needs to be in regularly to enable the brain to perform optimally. So the systems that make sure the blood containing the oxygen and nutrients needed reaches the brain suffer some wear and tear too with aging. And on top of that, our metabolism rate slows down. So it makes food processing, but not only food processing, last longer, and everything becomes kind of a more energy consuming process. So this practically means that the way our bodies process medication slows down remarkably too with increasing age. And we know as we grow older, most of us are taking some medications, and we're lucky if it's only once a day. So medication is a bit of a tricky point, because the longer the medication stays in our body, the more it might have a toxic effect on our brain, and the more it can make us feel sedated, tired, confused. And this does not really help us to get up and running, get up and do some physical exercise or even chores in the house, because we are quite rightfully afraid that we might fall and actually get hurt. So what we need to do is to clear the medication and all the other metabolites out of the body as fast as we can. And hydration is a crucial point here. It means that we should be drinking 6 to 8 cups of water on a daily basis to make sure we're well hydrated, but also exercise, as I mentioned, in regular basis, which helps the body to circulate regularly. So not only taking all the good stuff, oxygen, glucose and all other nutrients to the brain and other organs, but also taking the metabolites and remaining of medications out of the body, so clearing the body. So medication and exercise, hydration and exercise are incredibly important when we want to make sure our brain can perform well. as well as all other organs.
And is there anything we can do to prevent or delay the aging impact on our brains?
So that would be, again, the hydration, physical activity, as I've mentioned, but there are also other factors in play. We usually refer to them as 5 pillars of aging well. There are nutrition, these are nutrition, hydration, physical activity, cognitive stimulation, and social stimulation. These 5 pillars together represent quite a step change in making lifestyle choices on daily basis that might be quite small steps, but that can amount to a lot of change. So all these have kind of a preventative function in terms of aging impacting our brain, but the physical activity and hydration are absolutely crucial ones, because the hydration makes sure that our body is free from too many toxins that slow our brain down and impair the way our brain works. And regular physical activity makes sure that the blood with all the nutrients and oxygen finds the way to the brain on regular basis, which helps it to perform optimally. There is also research that World Health Organization published that says that we should have in between 120 to 150 minutes of exercise every week. I would probably say that if we can, it's ideal to have probably exercise every week, and everything counts. So we can be walking, we can be gardening, doing chores in the house, going up the stairs, going to the shops to do small shopping. Everything counts and can add up. There is another research as well that says that walking between 6 to 9 miles every week has a preventive effect to dementia. So that regular walking, especially outdoors, can actually prevent dementia or plateau or help us stabilize the decline once we've been diagnosed with dementia. So walking outdoors is immensely helpful. And if we can be present, mindful as well, it is a very important thing too. And this is what our other podcast was about. Ellie, would you like to mention that?
Yeah, so we're very lucky in Milton Keynes because we have so many parks available for walking and leisure activities. So lots of our parks are very accessible and they've got surface paths running through them. And we've been doing a big drive at the moment to highlight the accessibility of our parks, and we're working on improving access in some places. We have some resources to help older people and those living with dementia to engage with their surroundings, such as our dementia-friendly spotter sheet. And we spoke about this in an earlier podcast. And this resource that we've developed helps people to experience the wellbeing benefits of green spaces. So before COVID, we were working with St Andrew's Church in Great Linford and our Park Friends group to run a 5 ways dementia-friendly cafe and a guided walks programme that was promoting the wellbeing benefits of walking outdoors, as Yik has already outlined. And you can listen back to that podcast on YouTube and on our future Parks Trust podcast channel. We're really hopeful that the cafe can get back up and running again so that we can see the benefits for those people once more. But also here today is Dr. Abby, who knows about the psychological side of what happens to our brains when we age. So Abby, can you tell me a bit about what's happening inside our brains as we get older?
Yeah, sure thing, Ellie. So my role is as a clinical psychologist, and I'm also completing further training in neuropsychology. And in this, my post really is to support people who are living with neurological conditions, so acquired brain injuries, dementia, multiple sclerosis, with the goal of achieving the best that people can in terms of their mood and also their cognitive skills, so their memory and thinking. And as Yik has mentioned, people's brains change over time, and we also see specific changes with various neurological conditions. So to start in more general terms, the parts of the brain responsible for learning and memory are particularly susceptible to change with age. So this is the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. And this is why people report that it feels harder to learn new things in later life than it was when they were a child. And it can also feel more difficult to remember and pay attention to information, particularly complex information. And these changes are due to more than one thing. So there are changes in neurotransmitters, which are the body's chemical messages. There are changes in neurons that deal with the electrical signals that send messages. There's also changes in blood flow to the brain as arteries get narrower. There can be the presence of plaques, which are protein fragments, or tangles, which are twisted strands of proteins. And we also see increased inflammation, which is the body's process of fighting against things that harm it. But the good news is that some aspects of cognition also get better with age. So people's vocabulary, knowledge that relies on their verbal skills, and really anything that relies on increased perspectives and lived experience, quite understandably gets better with age. And it's an urban myth that every older person will go on to develop dementia. In reality, it's a spectrum from normal age-related decline through to a clinically diagnosable syndrome. And what most people don't know, Ellie, is that actually there are over 100 different types of dementia. It's just we often only hear about a handful of the most common ones, such as Alzheimer's. So some factors that are related to developing dementia are completely outside our control. For example, genetic factors are common in young onset dementia, or there may be past damage, such as what we're seeing in the media now about the reports about head injuries due to sports and how this links to later dementia. But whilst we cannot undo all factors, there are some that we can compensate for whilst aiming to prevent further damage. So as Yik has mentioned, the best way to do this is to address the lifestyle factors. So increasing moderate exercise, decreasing drinking and smoking, aiming for that healthy Mediterranean style diet that's very big on sort of leafy greens, nuts, lowering stress and improving sleep. And what these do is they decrease the vascular risk factors that make developing a vascular dementia, which is caused by reduced blood flow to the brain, more likely. And research shows that some parts of the brain are larger in people who exercise more than those who don't. And this is particularly the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. And also in these people who exercise more, they experience better connectivity. So the messages are getting through in the brain better. And they also experience lower inflammation. And I think it's really important to note that exercise doesn't have to be strenuous. And there are some brilliant chair-based exercises available on YouTube and from charities such as the MS Society that could easily be done by someone in a wheelchair in an outdoor setting. And biology aside, we know that staying active does great things for people's sense of identity, self-esteem, and their social connectedness. And these are so important for being happy in later life.
Thanks, Abby. It's really interesting. So as we get older, lots of things change in the body, but we can help our brains stay healthy by keeping our bodies active. As the weather improves and the world unlocks from the pandemic, we're hopeful this will provide more opportunities for older people to get active and to get outside. Thanks for joining me today, Yitka and Abby, and thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you'd like any further information, you can visit www.keepmewalking.info or check out our Open Learn articles, and the links for these are available with this podcast.